So, hi. For those who haven't met me already, my name is Anna. I am a senior UX designer at this company. Surprise. I'm over on the Candy One team, sitting with the economy group. And then for people at Meet Build this weekend, I tend to point out there's my Twitter handle if you have any questions or you want to put things down, photograph or whatever it is, reach out there. There's the hashtag as well. And some of you might not know what a UX designer actually is or does, and that's fine. You'll have a general understanding by the end of this. Cool. So my first job was in board games. I started off in board games in Sweden like 10 years ago. I had done a degree in graphic design, and I had applied for this job literally because it seemed fun. I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life, and I was like, board games? Oh yeah, cool. But it turned out to actually be super relevant, and I learned a lot about prototyping and gameplay mechanics and things. And then about a year later, I moved to Australia and landed a job at EA Fire Monkeys. And I started off as a UI artist on... That was creepy. I didn't... on The Sims Free Play. And then after about 4 years, I moved on to Need for Speed. And then I have just started here at Candy Crush. Cool, so UX design. UX stands for user experience, and it is the process of enhancing player satisfaction by improving the usability and the pleasure provided in the interaction between your player and your product. Basically, does it spark joy? And UX design is all-encompassing. That means it includes everything, from when a player first sees or hears about your product on Steam or Twitter or whatever it might be, all the way down to the most intricate details of your more experienced players. And it's not just games. UX can be applied to anything from how simple it is to use a certain type of coffee machine to how complicated or easy it is to withdraw money from an ATM, for example. So in true UX fashion, let me UX that for you. So if this is our player, this is our player base, and that's our game, then UX is the way in which a player interacts with our game. And this is our game development team. And so UX research is the way in which we analyze and understand our players and identify their needs and motivations. And then UX design is the way in which we use this information to design the gaming experience for them. And although there's a lot of overlap between UX and UI, the two are distinctly different. UX design is about organizing information and analyzing how we present that information to players, whereas UI art deals specifically with the physical appearance of the UI. And then before we begin, a lot of you might be asking, but I don't work with UX, so why is this relevant for me? And it's true, not every team has the luxury of having dedicated UX designers, and particularly within the indie community, that isn't always something that people have. But I'm hoping that everyone will at least come away from this with an understanding about the importance of UX design, how it affects literally every single aspect of the game development process, and how everyone can actually put on their own UX designer hat and incorporate aspects of it into their own day-to-day life and improve your team's processes. Because, as we mentioned earlier, UX design is all-encompassing, and it affects literally every aspect of gameplay. And so it's important to every role on the team too. So if you would imagine all of your roles as a Venn diagram of overlapping circles, then UX design will cover all of it. And for that reason, it's important for everyone to be aware of it and how it works. So, okay, sure, it's important, she said. But how do we do it then? Well, one of the best ways in which we can improve the way in which we work with games is by learning a technique known as rapid prototyping. So what is rapid prototyping? It's a technique designed to help developers create and validate quality ideas before jumping into a design prematurely. So you find solutions through sketching, getting feedback, and iterating on that several times. And the keyword here is iterations. Above all else, it is an iterative process. Effective UX design processes can be broken down into 3 stages. We've got prototyping, reviewing, and refining, and I'll go through all of these. We'll start off with prototyping, because so we start with prototyping, we review it and we test it, we refine that, and then we use that information to create a new prototype, and on the circle goes until we have a final product that we're happy with. But in order to do that, we need a prototype. Well, what is a good starting point for a prototype? Some of you might have seen this illustration already. There's been discussion about whether this actually is a good illustration for an MVP or not, but for the sake of this particular talk, this is fine, because right now what we're trying to do is transport a person from point A to point B. And we can immediately identify what the purpose of our product is, and so we create something super simple that satisfies that need. So up in the top, that doesn't help us transport anything up until the very end. Instead, this little thing right there, that step one, helps us satisfy that need. So that's where we start testing. That is our prototype. And then you evolve and you develop the idea from there. Prototypes can take on many forms. You can have digital prototypes. You can also do paper prototypes. So whatever your jam is, do that. They both serve different purposes, useful in different ways. So, rapid prototyping. It's a great tool for helping your team think through and solve big, complex problems. And it helps you solve them by visualizing and testing your designs and using them to make informed changes. Basically, stop agonizing about your struggles and then learn how to actually begin solving them. Which is great, right? Want to hear some other reasons why it's great? Because I got lots. It helps you iterate and test quickly to get the answers you want. You can quickly create something functional that you can actually test with right away. Help your team define what measurable goals actually are. How do we define that and scope that? You can identify and correct gameplay issues well before launch rather than finding them after you've launched something. As a result, it'll save you time and money. Time is money, etc., and reduces the risk of building something no one wants. We all know the story. Big epic company creates big epic shooty bang bang thing. You've got endless customization options and variations to suit every need. Lots of fantastic environments. The game is incredible. But in fact, it turns out all gamers really want is just to be an annoying goose. So, as a result, you get to test the validity of your design and quickly see what works and what doesn't. And as a result, you get to make any necessary modifications early instead of wasting time spending months working on stuff that you have to cut later down the road anyway. Your team is clearly aligned on what your objective is. Everyone knows exactly this is what we're working on. There's no confusion about people thinking that we're doing something else or working on stuff that we've actually decided that we're not going to do. Saving time. And it helps align business and creative teams' interests as well. So people who are, for example, BPUs will be very numbers driven, and the creative team might be very focused on the art. And that's okay. Everyone has their own areas of expertise and interest. But what testing early does is it helps everyone align on what's actually relevant and useful for the player. And as a result, the team knows how to define a successful deliverable. And another great thing is that your team can focus on what's important and not the minutiae. So, for example, what is in fact the core gameplay mechanic that we're trying to teach? And how do we do that in the simplest way, rather than, I don't like the color of that icon. But most importantly, by testing and listening to our players' needs, we learn to create better and more meaningful gaming experiences for them. So when should you be doing it? Basically all the time, throughout your dev process. If you're in pre-prod, early stages of game development, before you start building anything at all. But it's also useful for developing and integrating new features into existing games. So it's an important skill for all kinds of different teams to master, regardless of where in your development cycle you happen to be. So take a step back from whatever it is you're doing. Take a week to invest in this as a team, even if you're an indie team of 5 people. And I know that every single producer in the room straight away is starting to hyperventilate. It's 1 week. But trust me, 1 week's work now is nothing compared to having to pivot and panic in the last minute and throw out 6 months worth of work 1 month before you're meant to launch. this talk will teach you tangible skills for how to draw useful sketches, how to translate them into wireframes, and how to use these wireframes to create clickable prototypes, and why they're all important and you shouldn't skip any of them. And then we'll do a little quick demo in Adobe XD, just to show how easy it actually is. So let's get into it. All those things we said we're going to learn, coincidentally, happen to be the exact things that you need to know in order to make a prototype. Amazing. So let's start with sketches. So sketches are literally just that. They're just sketches. They're basic scribbles to communicate an idea. They're quick idea vomits, as I call them, for presenting important information for your concept. It's the backbone of your features content. And the first thing I learned during my very first week at EA was to never go into a meeting without a pen and paper. I got scolded straight away, first meeting. I personally am a huge fan of the white lines notepads. The paper is really light gray with white lines inside it, and it helps your annotations stand out clearly against the background without dark lines everywhere. And the little squares in the corners, they disappear when you scan the page with the app. There's a free app for it. And so it fixes all of the warping, fixes your contrast and your perspective and everything. So you get clear digital scans of your sketches directly to your computer straight away. Very useful. So why should you be sketching? Often people have different images in their heads. So getting something quickly onto paper helps align the entire team on what it is you're all thinking. So you're all on the same page. It ensures you know exactly what you're going to be working on so that nobody on your team wastes time on the wrong thing during the coming days. Because again, if you're working on the wrong thing, you're going to have to cut that, and then that leads to frustration, team, time, etc. So making sure everyone knows exactly what it is we're doing from day one, really good. It also helps the team know what the requirements are going to be, so that when you estimate for scope, and you get to keep your feature realistic. For example, are we going to need a leaderboard? That means that we need a cloud database. Or do we need a new form of currency that's going to need balancing? Are we going to need artwork for 12 different new prizes that we're going to do, for example? It just means that, excuse me, that engineers and PMs and artists and everyone knows what their own requirements are going to be, and they're going to be able to scope accurately from day one. Also, it helps with brainstorming, because seeing things visually helps trigger new ideas and solutions. And there's a great quote by a UX designer called Justin Baker that's always really resounded with me, which is that a UX designer's job is to solve problems, not push pixels. So what should sketches look like? They don't need to be pretty. I struggle to draw stick figures, to be completely honest. So I encourage you, be bad at art. It's fine. In fact, it's a good thing, because it helps the team focus on the content itself rather than the execution, the art. As I said before, we're here to solve problems, not push pixels. And so what should the sketches include? Just the basics. Draw the boundaries, so to speak, so the frame, the browser window, the phone, the actual interface that you're working with, and then just include your core concept. So only add the relevant details to that particular feature. If you're designing that little part, like one little mechanism over here, don't include all of the details in the header bar. Just one box that says header. Great, that's it. We know it's there. Don't sit there and distract the viewer with a whole bunch of other unnecessary details. And then try lots of different variations and layouts, and make sure that you have a whole list of requirements as well. Ask your designer, producer, or whoever's in the meeting, or whoever's providing you with the content, if there's anything else that needs to be included. Keep a list of your requirements nearby so you can check that everything is actually being included in your sketches. These were two examples from when I worked on the Sims Free Play. This was the Christmas update, where we needed to have a little dialogue that shows you a little countdown to the big Christmas event. And then we did a pregnancy update as well, which was the #1 most requested feature for the Sims of all time. Yeah, don't even. But it just blows my mind how in a game where you can like have a house full of puppies, or you can be a rock star, or you can like fly to the moon or do whatever, the #1 thing people wanted to do is get pregnant. But anyway, I'm not designing for myself. My job is designed to create a game for my players. So how we worked at Fire Monkeys was that producers, often in collaboration with community managers who knew what our players wanted and didn't want, they would decide what each feature would be, and every update would release a new theme, a new feature. And then game designers would develop the concept, they would decide what the unlockable content would be, how the feature would be played, what the limitations were, etc., etc. And then it was my job to take all of this information and play visual Tetris with it. So we'd have regular meetings with stakeholders from each team. So we'd have like a coder or one of the designers, someone from QA, someone from art. We'd have someone from every single team that was responsible, often a lead. And this was really important in the beginning because that means that those people can straight away flag if there are any potential problems, understand what the requirements are for their particular team. And then, as I said before, scope and stuff as well. And it helps us make sure that what we're trying to build is in fact realistic. And it's not just whether we can build it, but also whether we can build it within a realistic time frame with the team that we have available. So ideally, your sketching process should look a little bit like this. It's an approach known as the double diamond approach. And so we start off with idea generation. You go wide, you brainstorm, there's lots of different variations, and then you refine that. You pick the one that you like and you refine it, and you define what it is that you're actually creating. And then again, you go wide, you develop that idea, brainstorm lots of different variations, and then you refine that again until you have your final deliverable. Set a time frame. If it's just during a meeting, great, you have a set time already. Otherwise, maybe 30 minutes. This helps you focus, curb the chaotic thoughts, and get on with your work. After your meeting, if you need to, refine your sketches, clean them up, add annotations so that you can share them across your team. And then, annotate if needed, and then ask for feedback. It's really important for the entire team to get an insight into this. You want to find the holes early. Don't be precious about your designs. Get people to shred them, tear them apart, find the problems early, because it takes 5 minutes to redo a sketch. It takes weeks to redo an entire feature. So this is the bit where you really want people to find all the holes so that you can fix it early. And iterate on all of those ideas, of course. And then save all of your sketches. Put them up on the walls. Let your whole team see them, because not only does it help to align your team on what it is you're creating and increases visibility for everyone, but also it helps generate more ideas, because people can see what it is, if there's any better solutions for things. And also lets you see how your feature has evolved over time. Digitalize your sketches for future reference after the papers have been discarded, because not only are they great for archiving, but they're also really good for post-mortems. It lets you see how your idea has evolved and see how much your scope has inevitably creeped. Identify what you struggled with or what you did well. Did your final product end up looking completely different to the original thing that you had envisioned? Or did you nail it straight away because you tested and iterated that thing from your sketch phase? Good on you. And as I mentioned before, sketches are really good to help with scoping. So use your sketches to scope realistically. Everything is going to seem super simple in the beginning, and then you start building and you realize that there are so many other things that you didn't think of. So use them to reduce the scope of your game's MVP. I'm serious. At this point, have it again. Reduce everything. Move on. But trust me, by the end of this, you'll understand exactly the importance of this. So, wireframes. Another fancy word for something that is, in fact, super simple. Wireframes are just a set of boxes and lines used to present functional elements of your game or feature. It's your sketches, but digital. That's it. So, sketch, wireframe. It had evolved a little bit at this point, but basically the same idea. And then an example of, so this is the Christmas update that I mentioned before. An example of what the wireframes look like, and then what the high fidelity screens, like the high fidelity mock-ups, look like. And our final screens ended up looking pretty much exactly like this. So during this update, we had a really clear vision, because it's Christmas. We've done Christmas updates every year, so I knew already more or less what it was we were doing. So that one was bang on, super easy, straightforward. But it gives you at least an idea of what the level of fidelity that you're expected at this point is, because people here, you can focus on
presentation and functionality and what it is we're actually doing. How do we click through it? How many clicks does it take? Is the information coherent? Is all the information there? Rather than, oh, that guy looks a little bit creepy. You want to be focusing on the right issue.
Cool. So what are clickable prototypes? They're simply a collection of all of those wireframes put together with functionality built in. So you have transitions, buttons that link to pages, expandable widgets, your drop-down menus, and they basically just help simulate the game's flow. And it requires no code, requires no art. You can do all of this without wasting any of the rest of your team's precious time. Again, time is money, etc., etc. But, I hear you say, but why? It just seems like extra work. Why can't I just start building it? Because they help with the functionality of your game feature before your entire team starts spending months or years, depending on your team, building that thing. You get to click through the entire game feature and get game or feature and get a genuine feel for what the gameplay is actually going to feel like. So how many clicks does it take to do a certain thing? As I said before, is all of the information there and visible? Is it easy to understand? Are we not overloading the player with lots of different things all at once? Does the player even know where to click? Are they able to set goals for themselves? For example, I want to unlock this particular thing. How do I do it? Or I want to change my weapon, or I want to empower this particular booster to clear this level. Do they know how to do the thing? Bless you. And another really important thing that's often forgotten is that doing this helps you be aware of all the different required states that a widget could have, or a button, or anything. For example, does it need to have a locked state, an unlocked state, an active state, a completed state, and so forth and so forth? Because if you're just looking at a static black and white image, you don't really think about all the different variations that that thing needs to have as the gameplay progresses. So in your wireframe, yeah, it'll look like a simple thing when actually there's a lot of work behind that particular thing. So this is actually super crucial for helping you set realistic time estimations and thus manage scope. So important for the entire team, not just the UX team. Should you decide to have like a leaderboard, for example, as I mentioned before, your engineers need to know this straight away on day one, because that means they need to start thinking about like, how do we set up a cloud database? Do we, what was the other thing I had? Tracking scores in real time, or pushing live updates to players as those numbers progress. Every single feature that you create will have ramifications for other people. So helping them know this and be able to prepare for this early and set realistic scope is going to save you a lot of stress and very final hurdles. And which brings us to part 3 of my talk, which is how do we make them? Lots of different tools out there for wireframing and prototyping. Some of them provide extra functionality. So if you know how to code a script, for example, you can really customize your prototypes. I know Proto.io does that. But usually extra functionality means that they come with a cost. For indie teams, you'll usually want to use one of the free softwares. That last one, Marvel, is free, but also has an app, which is a really cool prototyping tool. It's called POP, which I think stands for Prototyping on Paper. And it lets you create, prototypes directly on your phone. Also, I've got a Google Doc link at the very end, so for people who want to know what all the different references are, I've got that. But this app lets you create digital prototypes directly in the app itself. You can scan your drawings otherwise as well and work from there. Highly recommended, it's free. Another thing that's free is Adobe XD, which I personally am a huge fan of, and that's what I'm going to be using to demonstrate some quick prototyping on today. And because it is done by Adobe, so it is a big team, they've got a big budget, which means it's very stable. It's constantly evolving. They're adding new features. And it's got lots of simple tools that let you put together a rough screen in literally seconds. And since it's got really good integration with other Adobe programs, so you can import vectors from Photoshop or Illustrator, you can import effects and things from After Effects. So if you work in an Adobe environment already, then really that should be a no-brainer. Also, it's not a sponsored talk, but Adobe can totally sponsor. Are they allowed to do that? instead of me talking about a whole bunch of about how easy this is, let's just demonstrate it. Yay, let's create something right now. So a game that I suspect that everyone in this room is at least somewhat familiar with. For the sake of time, instead of creating something completely unknown from scratch, I thought it would be simpler to just recreate something that we're familiar with. Also because it makes it easier for you to know exactly what I'm prototyping and what each thing is for. So we've got our main Saga map, the settings, inventory, pre-level pop-up, as the core gameplay screen, and the post-game pop-up. So let's go. Let's see if I'm able to do this. Yes, great. So has anyone, I know Daniel's used XD. Has anyone else worked in XD at all? Yeah, awesome. You'll already know pretty much what I'm going to do. So I've taken the liberty of preparing a sketch here for this totally fictional app that absolutely doesn't exist, that we're definitely all creating from scratch right now. But first, a little tour of Adobe XD. Similar to Illustrator, we can just draw things straight away. You've got color palettes here on the left, which are really good for, I mean, everything here on the left is has the same functionality in that if you change the if you change what this is, it'll apply that to every instance. It'll update here, so it'll apply that to every instance of that palette being used throughout your document. Same thing for character styles and components, also known as symbols for those who use Sketch. So if you have a document with 20 different screens and you just want to update the way that one button looks like, you just update the master button and then all of them will update automatically. Let me open up the... Say I were to create this inventory, which I know that we're apparently getting rid of, but nobody else needs to know this. I'm just creating a random screen in this completely new game that we don't play already. This is a descriptive text box. Great. Oops. I'm not used to drawing on this laptop, and I'm going to have to get used to working straight on the laptop before Belgium this weekend. Anyone who's worked in InDesign will recognize using these character styles as the same functionality there. Checking that. All of this is familiar to most, I would assume. And then doing this here. So again, as I said before, with wireframes and sketches, they're basically the same thing but digital. If anything is unclear, please just say so straight away. I am just going to work live. And if it gets boring at any point, you let me know as well. Not that it's going to affect anything, but you can let me know. I tend to use wide numbers when I do prototypes, because if I was to write 1, 2, 3, for example, then that wouldn't be an accurate reflection of how wide this number could potentially be. So if my BPUs want to know exactly how to balance this new currency that we're putting in, they need to know what space that we have to work with, or the other way around. If I know that we're going to be dealing with up to 6 numbers, then I need to know that those 6 numbers actually fit. And if I put in 1, 2, 3, then I don't know if, oh wait, what am I doing? Then I don't know if that's actually going to fit, because 8 is wider than 1. So just a little thing to be mindful of. Here is my favorite function in Adobe XD. It's called repeat grid. And it
is magic. You just drag that across and it duplicates the entire repeating grid for you. And then you can adjust all the spacing between them like that as well.
Witchcraft.
It is witchcraft.
You said about the numbers using wide numbers. Do you do the same with letters, like the uppercase W?
It's generally because we're going to be using, in mobile games, we tend to interpret games into different languages anyway, so you tend to be a little bit more flexible with text boxes. I mean, this goes out into another area, but I tend to, if I know that there's a very little amount of space that we're working with, I tend to tell the game designers or the whoever is writing the strings that we have a restriction of a character count. So if it's a general text box, cool, we can do little scrolling boxes. If we have exactly this much space, then I'll say your max character count is W's and things, so that we can make sure that that actually fits. Otherwise, we'll get like scrolling things in buttons, which is generally awful. Another little thing to be mindful of is cropping the content, or having a bit of content visible on the bottom end of your scrollable area, because that helps the player realize that there is more to scroll, and they'll naturally want to see what that is. If this was cropped like that, for example, oh god, that flickering is really setting me off. People would probably look at that and not realize that you have things to scroll for. So having a little bit of more information visible is a really good way to encourage people to actually scroll and see all of the information that's there available. Great, so we've got that, we'll group that, and then we are going to jump into this little one here that I've already prepped, taking this liberty. We drop it into here. So here we've got a number of different screens. All of these are artboards. We can add more artboards automatically, change them to your different device sizes. It's super fast. So so you've got your little design section here, and then you flick into this button here, which is the prototyping section. Or in the words of MTV Cribs, this is where the magic happens. And then we can quickly link these. So I'd already linked that before, but we can remove that. Just to show you how easy it is, you literally just drag drop. And then what we're going to do, it's going to overlay, but I want this to, slide right, oh there it is, slide right, I'd already done it. You can pick if you want it to slide left, slide right, whatever it is. And then for the ending, next and back, I've already put back, cool. So that's literally it, you just drag drop arrows, and then you go to your home button, make sure that you got the right screen selected, and you hit play. And this will bring up a clickable prototype here. So we had that little settings overlay. You can find your inventory there, and then you can click into your gameplay. You hit play, and I swipe a bunch, and then I get to here, and I got 2 stars. Yay, go me. And back to the beginning we go. So you saw how quickly it is to create an entire screen and merge it in, add transitions, and actually get something functional that you can test straight away. And what's really cool with this as well is that you can, now I haven't connected it to my phone, but if you have the Adobe XD app, you can test that straight away onto your device, which is super useful for seeing is the text actually legible? Are the buttons too small? Because clicking on something with a mouse on a computer is a completely different experience to actually sitting there and not being able to press something with your button. Or is my thumb covering important information? Am I as a player not able to see things because it's under my hand? So it's really important and useful to get things onto a device to actually see how it feels and how it plays through. And really another good thing that XD has is you've got your UI kits. So if you hit that, you can get lots of design resources. So buttons, icons, widgets, all the kind of stuff. For iOS, for Mac, you've got them for for Google, and then there's an endless amount of UI kits available, because the entire idea is that you're trying to save time. There's no point in spending half an hour trying to recreate a particular kind of icon when it's already available and it's free. Just go there, grab it. The entire point of prototyping quickly is to get content out, quickly done, and just put it into the hands of players. Test it as fast as you can. This shouldn't take time, ideally. Is there anything else? Yes. So sharing your design specs. If I was connected to the cloud, you can actually export this as well, and you can get design specs that you can share with your entire team. And your engineers will love you for this, because it'll tell you exactly where this particular icon is supposed to sit, how many pixels it is, what the margins pixel size is, every single little detail for this, what fonts to use, what size they're meant to be, the behavior, is it right aligned, is it left aligned, is it supposed to expand with a particular thing. All of that is included straight away. And every time you update it and export your link, all of that gets updated straight away to your engineers as well. So super, super useful. And there's a shareable link, so you can put it onto Kingfluence, and everyone can click through their prototypes on their computers or on their devices as well. So yeah, Adobe XD. So to finish off. Cool, so now we have a prototype, then what? Next step is reviewing, and that was the testing phase, as I said before. Testing is super important. Let me rephrase that, testing is crucial. And then because we're designing a game for our players, not for ourselves. And how is a game going to be successful if nobody wants to play it? And then how do we test it? So this is a whole other talk. But I'll take a quick moment just to say a few things. You don't need to be intimidated by the testing process. It doesn't need to be complicated. And just like everything I've taught here today, it can be done by anyone, really. You just need to understand the basics and why we're doing the things we're doing, and the rest is simple. Also, testing can be quantitative, which is where you test, where you test things on large groups of people. So if you need large volumes of players to test a particular thing, for example, what percentage of players click on a particular button, or what percentage of people manage to actually play through an entire level that we've created, that's a great brain. I just completely blanked on languages, words, whatever. That's a great way to test that. There we go. Playtest Cloud, I know that we use, great source for that. Or testing can be qualitative, which is useful for testing things where you want to watch and interact with a few players from a specific demographic. And so this is good for when you want to have more of a dialogue with your test subject in order to learn specific things, like do they understand what it is they need to do? What is it that they are struggling with? What is it that motivates them to actually play this particular feature to begin with? Or how do they feel about a specific new mechanic that we've tried to introduce, and so forth. And user interviews are super useful for all kinds of teams, ranging from tiny indie teams up to huge AAA studios creating very specific things. And I did a fun workshop on UX testing. It was user interviews that I did specifically. And I actually encourage everyone to come to this prepared with a game that they were working on. And then by the end of it, they learned a whole bunch of testing techniques, and they created actual tangible test plans that they could use and implement to test their own prototypes. So that was really fun. If you're interested in that, go check it out. It's on YouTube. Which brings us to the very end of our little UX design loop, which is iterating and refining. Because now that we've prototyped it and we've tested it, we can now take all of that information and we take it back to our team and we iterate on our game, and we can start working on our next prototype, and so forth until we have a final product that we're ready to release. So to summarize everything we learned today, rapid prototyping helps you solve big complex problems by quickly visualizing and testing your designs and using that information to make informed changes to your gameplay. And informed is the key word there. So don't get caught in details, work quickly, fail fast, find solutions early. Because, as I said throughout the presentation, we're not here to push pixels, we're here to solve problems. Like that. Let me tell
tell people as well that if they're too intimidated to ask a question in a big room full of people, they can tweet at me, and I'm happy to answer questions in DMs too. Cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you have any questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's super great to prototype like this. The one thing I always feel in the beginning of a project is that it usually tends to be one thing that you iterate.
Mhm.
And I think, do you have any experience of how to do that efficiently? Because I feel that it would be great to have like 3 different things that think about the problem in different ways, because you tend to just focus on one and then iterate on that. But
Yeah.
maybe that wasn't the right thing in the, especially when it comes to complicated meta situations in a game. It's like maybe you should have like scrapped that whole screen and did totally something else.
Usually, if I'm stuck in my own particular kind of thought and I've got an idea and I know that my brain's not letting go of it, I'll usually jump onto another team and grab one of the other UX designers, and I'll just be like, hey, how would you solve this? Do you have an instinctive thought, like 5 minutes? I'm not expecting them to sit down and like spend 3 hours working on something, but like 5 minutes, scribble ideas, like how would you solve this particular thing? And they might do something similar, but they might say a word, or they might identify a particular issue that'll trigger something in you, and you'll be like, oh yeah, we can totally do that instead. Or just get the rest of your team. Often UX designers will have a particular way of thinking, and if you ask a programmer, how would this make sense to you? Or a producer, how would this make sense to you? How would you want to unlock this thing? If you need to change the variables, how would you want to do that? And usually people with a different background and different mindset will try to solve problems in a different way. That answer?
Yeah. That gives ideas of how to do it in a different way.
Try and get other people to just say words or draw little scribbles. Usually that will trigger stuff. Or Google, play other games, look at other screens, look at stuff that's not games. Often functionality and productivity apps I've found are a really good resource for technical solutions to things, because they often have really smart mechanisms as well. So,
From a game design perspective, something that I'd like to understand from a UX perspective is, where does logic flow fall into this? Because it's great when you already have an app that you know how it's going to work. But if I'm designing a new feature and I don't really know quite where it's going to fit in, I'll normally create a logic flow first to try and understand where it fits in. So where would that be applied in this process?
I'm not familiar with the term logic flow. Is that
Visio, do you know Visio? Okay. It is an even more simplified version of this, which is game screen goes to, if I fail, I go to the fail screen. If I pass, I go. Flow chart.
Yeah, got it. Yeah.
Logic flow.
Yeah.
But for me to visualize what screens are going to be needed, not even just the functionality on the screens, I like to think of that beforehand. And I'm just wondering, would you apply or do some of that first before then going into the sketches?
Yeah. So how I worked at Fire Monkeys is the only real reference I can give there, which was the game designers would have provided that for us. So because they're fleshing out the entire feature or the concept, when you click here, that should take you to this thing. And then in this screen, there should be some way to produce this result. So I'll use that as my skeleton, my reference point, in order to create what the screens are actually going to look like. Because before I even create a screen, I need to know what is the function of what it is I'm doing. I can't, and this was a discussion that we had the other day, which is I can't design a screen if I don't know what the point of the screen is. So it's really, really important for me to have exactly that. Sorry, I'd never heard the term logic flow before. But I need to have that before I begin my work. Or if something clearly doesn't work, if I've designed it and I go, all right, well, that can't be in there, there's too much, we have to push that to another place. Obviously, that's a dialogue that I'll have with the game designer to make sure that, is it actually realistic that we do that, or is that going to confuse our players, whatever it is. But I would ideally want that to be done already.
Or I can do it as well if we can communicate about it.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.